Okay, bunk bed 101. Start with the parts. This is the low football end, and this is a high end. Okay, these are the side rails for the top bunk, the guard rails. This is the ladder that goes with the top bunk. Two sets of bed rails. The top one have embedded nuts in them. The bottom ones don't. Two sets of bed slats, one for the top, one for the bottom, and a parts kit with all the screws, nuts and bolts. First thing you have to decide is if you want it as two single beds, then obviously the small ones become the footboards and the large one becomes the headboards. If you want it as a bunk, the two large ones go on the bottom, the two small ones go on the top, the large ones on the bottom for head clearance. Okay, so to build them, you take a footboard. Okay, if you're going to use it, let's try to use it as bunks. You can change it the way you want to do it. So for the bunks, you use the two large on the bottom. Okay, so you take one of these and a lower bed rail, the kind without the nuts in them. You locate this large dowel here with the large hole. Do this okay. Room. Okay. Come around here. You okay. The dowel goes in this large hole here, the center hole from the like so. You then take one of these bolts and a barrel nut. These here. These go through the outside of the bed, headboard, footboard, whatever. And the barrel nut goes in here, in the hole in the side, like so. Keep the screwdriver slot to the outside. If you keep it horizontal, that matches up with the screw, so the screw will go in there and meet up with that. You tighten them up. The other one, the other barrel one, goes in here the same way. Goes in the bottom. Keep the screw head out. If you line the screw head up horizontally, it will meet up with the bottom bolt. So that's that. So you build that. There will be 8 screws, 2 at the bottom on each end and 2 at the bottom on the other end. So 2, 4, 6 and 8 depending on your setup.
So 16 if you're making bunk.
There's 16 if you're making bunk beds, or 2 single beds, there's still 16. Okay, all of these are secured with an Allen key, which is included right there. It goes. Okay, so you build these with the 2, if you're making the bunk bed, with these 2 and the 2 side rails. Just put that aside, take the 2 smaller head or footboards, depending on whatever you choose them to be, and use the other 2 side rails, the ones with the screws, the nuts in them. These 2 like this, and repeat this procedure. Bolts through the ends, dowels, and you're done. So now you've got 2 basic bed frames. At this point I would suggest that you now lift the top bunk bed, which will be the one with the smaller head and footboards, onto the top of these 2. There is a hole in the top of these, into which goes one of these steel stems. Same idea, it slips in like this, and from the outside one of these bolts goes in and secures it, like so. That just screws in. So now you will have 4 of these, one here, and 2 at the other end. You now lift the other bed with the small head and footboards up and place it on top of there. So now you have the basic of the 2 bunks.
So you put the screw in, lift up the top thing and put it in.
Slide
and
it
then
over,
slide it
so
in,
what you're
and
gonna
then
be
do the
fa-
screws on.
Yeah, so what you're going to be faced with, once again, is this stud, shaft, whatever you want to call it, will be in here, and you've screwed it into the bottom, and then you just lower the top two of the whole bed which you've made onto this.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way to do it. Okay, once you've done that, the reason I suggest that you put it together now is because you start putting other stuff together, it's going to get pretty heavy. So now you're faced with two bed frames, one on top of the other. You now put these slats in. These slats will locate on top of the side rails, and they go in here. They're taped together. When the tape comes off, they're held together by cloth tape. You just unroll them down the bed. So they sit here like this. Sorry, they actually sit on here like this. These different things. Every once in a while you'll see a small hole like this. They correspond with holes there in the slats themselves, and you use these screws to screw them in. They screw through the bed slats and into there. So once you've done the bottom one, you do the top one, repeat the same, unroll the slats, put the screws in. That is now basically the whole thing built. These two side rails are different. One has provision for the ladder, the other doesn't. So at this point you have to decide where you're going to put, how you're going to orient this. But either way, let's use the one with the ladder. This side rail, the bolts are taped in here, will mate up with one of these side bed rails, and it screws into there from the inside like that. Okay, so this one is the one with the ladder, so it goes that way. I think the recommendation is the ladder is at the foot of the bed. So once you've done that, do the other one on the other side, a repeat of that, just the 4 bolts which are already taped in there into the 4 nuts. And that should be it. So now you've got the bed, you've got the slats, and you've got the 2 guardrails. The last thing that goes on is the ladder. It faces downwards like this. These 2 hooks hook into the bottom rail, like so. This one hooks into, let's find out which way around this is. This one goes underneath the top bunk rail, and this one goes on top of it, and there is actually a slot right here to accommodate it, that piece there, it goes in there. Okay, and then these 2 bolts go through the 2 holes in the side rail, which is already bolted to it, and that's basically it. There's not really a lot to it.
Okay.
Any problems, call me.